When people think of dark comedies, the tendency is to go straight to films about death, murder, mass annihilation. At first glance, the 1972 film The Heartbreak Kid feels like a breezy light romantic comedy. But underneath the familiar rom-com antics, zany situations, and cheerful soundtrack, there lies an irredeemably black heart. A relentless examination of an empty world full of empty people.
How's it going?
It's Miami.
I know what you mean.
It's also totally hilarious. At the film's center is Lenny Cantrell, possibly the emptiest man on earth.
Hi.
He quickly meets, courts, and marries fellow New Yorker Lila Kolodny,
Hi.
all within the first 5 minutes of the movie, including the opening titles, which serve as a sly parody of the romantic montage, already a hackneyed device by 1972.
Oh, pizza! How did you know?
During the honeymoon, Lenny discovers that he doesn't actually care for his new wife very much, and chafes at the very thought of sharing his life with her. While Lila recovers from a bad sunburn in their hotel room, Lenny's on the beach, where he's suddenly smitten with a flirty blonde goddess named Kelly, who he immediately pursues while feeding Lila an increasingly complex web of lies.
Where are you going now?
Honey, I've got to visit Wilmer's family. Wilmer keeled over signing an affidavit.
At the same time, he's astonishingly forthright with Kelly and her family about his marital status and his plans, and he makes his case as if it were the most admirable thing in the world.
Sitting opposite you, Mr. Corcoran, is probably the most determined young man that you have ever seen.
Lenny, brilliantly played by Charles Grodin, is a psychopath. He has no empathy. He manipulates any given situation in order to have his way. He shamelessly ingratiates himself with Kelly's father, played with hilarious, barely contained hatred by Eddie Albert, who got an Oscar nod for this role. At the same time, Lenny is astonishingly callous towards Lila, his sweet, unsophisticated wife, played by Jeannie Berlin, who also received an Oscar nomination. Describing the film this way, The Heartbreak Kid doesn't sound very funny at all, but it always makes me laugh, and it's quite possibly my favorite comedy. The laughs are fueled by nervous discomfort and an unabashed, almost gleeful cynicism you don't see in most comedies, which usually resort to either the heartwarming or the absurd. Not only is it a cringe comedy made decades before cringe comedy became a thing, it's a cringe comedy with a strong sense of purpose. Although the screenplay was adapted by Neil Simon from a short story by Bruce J. Friedman, this is most definitely an Elaine May film. Her previous film, A New Leaf, which she wrote, directed, and starred in, dealt with similar themes of male privilege.
By the way, who's Henrietta Lowell?
Well, she's old Guy Lowell's daughter.
Well, who's old Guy Lowell?
Well, he was an industrialist, or a composer, something like that.
Lenny networks with the very same captains of industry,
But there's a lot of money in tear gas.
Yes, indeed.
which is appropriate, as his idea of love is really acquisition. He uses the same empty language employed by business leaders and politicians.
I think we've taken enough out of this country. I believe it's time that we started to think about putting something back into this country.
Lenny sounds suspiciously like John F. Kennedy.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Lenny seems to exhibit the same sort of drive and relentless self-belief that we expect from our leaders. His goal of quickly removing his wife from the picture and winning the girl of his dreams may not be the loftiest ambition in history, but it's still an ambition, and we live in a society that admires the achievement of practically anything, which explains why we're so often convinced by a committed bullshit artist.
You think I'm making it up? My God! My God! You think I'm making it up?
Hey, bless my soul, smooth your brow.
Music brings an additional layer of irony to the film's atmosphere. The film's theme song is firmly on Lenny's side.
You'll hit your stride any day, and you'll be on your way. You're going far.
The soundtrack has that buoyant yet sentimental vibe prominent in early 70s pop music, a sound readily exploited by advertising, reinforcing conventional ideas of love and romance.
And yes, we've just begun.
The quintessential love song of the period, Close to You, written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, pops up in several of the film's key moments. A sweeping instrumental version of Close to You provides bitter commentary to the film's harshest moment, in every way equal to Marion Crane's murder in Psycho. Close to You, in fact, would have been a perfect ironic title for the movie. La Bonheur, a beautifully disturbing film by Agnes Varda, is a similar tale of male desire and female expendability, but without the laughs. It's interesting to note that La Bonheur and The Heartbreak Kid both received criticism from some contemporary feminists for being anti-woman, when in fact the opposite is true, and obvious to anyone with a sense of irony. I should probably mention the 2007 remake. Yes, it's terrible, but it's an interesting study. If Lenny Cantrell from the original film eventually made it to Hollywood and BS'd his way into film production, the 2007 movie would be exactly the kind of film he would make. Shallow, pandering to the lowest common denominator, depicting Lila as a crazed psycho bitch, while portraying himself as not necessarily heroic, but at least less despicable than most of the other characters. Long out of print, a decent copy of the 1972 film is hard to find, although earlier VHS and DVD releases are still floating around, and low-res uploads can be watched online. If there's ever a much-deserved Criterion release of The Heartbreak Kid within the next 10 years, I can almost guarantee that the film will end up on the Sight and Sound list in 2032. It's that good. And it will stay relevant for as long as deception, gaslighting, and mental cruelty remain possible side effects of romantic involvement.
You'll soon be safe and sound.